The pastor had seen small funerals before, but never one this empty. It was 10:04 a.m. when he looked up from the pulpit and realized no one was coming. No family, no friends, not even a co-worker. Just a single casket, a faint scent of lilies, already starting to fade, and the steady tick of the clock echoing through the quiet chapel. Outside, rain tapped against the stained glass like polite applause for a life that had gone unnoticed. The woman's name was Evelyn Carter, or at least that's what it said on the paperwork. Age 61. Found alone in a small apartment downtown. Heart failure, natural causes, no listed emergency contacts, no one to claim the body. The county would have handled it, cremation, a numbered tag, a space on a shelf, if the pastor hadn't volunteered to say a few words. Every soul deserves a goodbye, he'd told the clerk at the morgue. He hadn't expected to be saying it to empty pews. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice steady. Dearly beloved. Though we are few, the Lord reminds us that even a sparrow does not fall unnoticed. But the words died in his throat, drowned by a distant low rumble. At first he thought it was thunder rolling across the hills. Then it grew louder, closer, deeper. The windows trembled. The lilies on the casket quivered. He stepped toward the door, heart thudding. Outside, down the slick gray road, a convoy of motorcycles emerged from the rain. Headlights cut through the mist like a parade of ghosts. 1, 2, then a dozen, maybe more, rolling in slow, deliberate formation. They stopped in front of the chapel, engines idling like beasts holding their breath. The pastor froze. The lead rider swung a leg off his bike, leather jacket soaked, beard streaked with rain, eyes hidden behind dark shades. He looked at the church sign, then at the hearse parked beside it. Something flickered across his face, a flash of recognition or grief, or both. The pastor hesitated, unsure whether to open the door or call the police. Before he could decide, the lead biker did it for him. He pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped inside. The sound was jarring, boots on tile, dripping water, the faint jingle of chains. Behind him came the others, 12 men and women, silent, soaked to the bone, carrying their helmets in one hand. The pastor's voice cracked. I'm sorry, this service is private. The lead biker nodded. We know. He walked straight to the front pew, eyes locked on the casket. We're family, he said quietly. The pastor blinked. Family? There wasn't any family listed. The man gave a tired smile. Sometimes family ain't about paperwork, preacher. The others followed, filling the pews in respectful silence. One woman, small but tough-looking, placed a single white rose on the casket. Another man, broad-shouldered with tattoos curling up his neck, bowed his head like he was praying. The pastor didn't know what to say. He just stood there, hand, trembling slightly on his Bible, as the smell of rain and motor oil filled the air. After a long silence, he tried again. Did you know Miss Carter well? The leader's jaw tightened. Not like we should have, he said softly. That answer sent a chill down the pastor's spine. He glanced toward one of the bikers near the back, a young man, maybe early 20s. Unlike the others, his hands were shaking. He stared at the casket like he was afraid to blink. When the pastor began the prayer again, the young man suddenly stood and hurried outside. The leader turned, eyes following him. The pastor whispered, "Is he all right?" The biker's voice was low. He just found out what family means. Outside, rain poured harder. The young man stood by his bike, helmet still clutched in his hand. He was crying, not loud but raw, shoulders shaking under the rain. He pulled something from his pocket, an old photograph, edges worn soft by years of searching. A woman with kind eyes smiled back at him. It was her. Evelyn Carter. Inside, the pastor continued, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust." But the words didn't fit anymore. Not with the sound of quiet grief outside and the hum of engines waiting like thunder in the distance. Something holy was happening, not in scripture, but in silence. When the young man came back inside, his face was pale, his lips trembling. He walked straight to the casket and laid the photograph on top. Then he whispered, voice breaking, "I found you, Mom. I finally found you." A murmur rippled through the pews. Shock, heartbreak, disbelief. Even the leader blinked hard, looking away for a second. The pastor's knees went weak. He clutched the pulpit, whispering a prayer under his breath. Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, time seemed to stop. The young man stood there, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from his jacket. For the first time, Evelyn Carter wasn't alone, and the echo of her name, once lost, once forgotten, was now surrounded by the rumble of a brotherhood she'd never met, but had somehow brought together. The leader stepped forward, resting a hand on the young man's shoulder. "We got you, kid," he said. "You ain't saying goodbye alone." And as the pastor looked out over the pews, at those rough faces softened by sorrow, he realized something he'd never forget. Some funerals don't end lives. They finish stories that were waiting to be found. For most of the people who passed her on the street, Evelyn Carter was invisible. She lived in the kind of apartment building nobody paid attention to. Cracked bricks, flickering hallway lights, a buzzing front doorbell that never worked. Her neighbors remembered her as polite but quiet. She always wore the same faded blue cardigan and carried a paper grocery bag with just enough for one person. She didn't own a car, didn't have visitors, and rarely went out after dark. When the mailman left a package, she'd thank him with a shy smile. But she never gave more than her first name. There was nothing about her that screamed story. Nothing that made anyone think a dozen bikers would one day thunder into a church for her. And yet, if you asked the right people, the diner waitress on 5th Street, the old man who ran the pawn shop, the kids who hung out by the corner store, they'd each tell you the same strange thing. She was kind. Like too kind. Like she'd been there before. At the Henderson Diner, where she sometimes washed dishes for extra cash, the cook still remembered the night she stayed past closing. A teenage girl had come in crying, bruises visible under her hoodie. Evelyn had taken her into the back room, given her a sandwich, and quietly called a women's shelter. No one ever found out who the girl was. But the cook swore she saw Evelyn's hands shaking when she hung up the phone. Not from fear, but from memory. She knew what that girl was running from, the cook said softly. At the pawn shop, the owner kept a small photo frame on the counter, an old picture of his late wife. The glass had cracked down the middle. He said Evelyn came in one morning, asked for tape, and fixed it right there. Didn't charge, didn't want anything, just smiled and said, "Some things shouldn't stay broken." He never forgot that. Even the kids from the neighborhood and the ones most adults avoided remembered her. Every Halloween, she'd leave a bowl of candy by her door, a note taped beside it. "Take what you need. Leave what you can." Sometimes there'd be an apple. Sometimes a dollar bill folded beneath the candies. They never knew who she was, just that she cared. But here's the thing no one realized. Every kindness she gave out was quietly connected to a past she never talked about. A past that still rode motorcycles. At the funeral, the bikers sat in silence long after the prayer ended. No one moved to leave. The rain had stopped, but it didn't feel right to break the moment. The pastor watched as the young man, the one who'd called her Mom, stood beside the casket, tracing the outline of the photograph he'd laid down. The leader, a man called Reed, finally spoke. "She used to ride with us," he said quietly. "A long time ago," the pastor turned, stunned. "You mean she was part of your club?" Reed nodded. "Back then we weren't what we are now. We were just kids with engines and nowhere to be. She was the one who made us better." He chuckled softly, the kind that hurts more than it heals. "She used to patch us up when fights got bad. Said if we had time to bleed, we had time to fix what caused it. She made us look out for people, especially the ones nobody else would. He looked around the chapel at the others. Weathered faces, tattooed arms, hard men with soft eyes. She changed the way we rode. Made us more than a gang. The pastor frowned. Then why didn't she stay? Reed finished for him. Because sometimes love and guilt look the same when you've lost too much. He gestured toward the young man. That's her son, Tyler. She left when he was a baby. Thought it'd keep him safe. The room went still. Tyler looked up, eyes red, voice barely steady. I never knew her. Not really. My dad used to say she was gone because she didn't care. He paused, breath shaking. But I found her old letters last month. All of them returned, unopened. She never stopped writing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a handful of creased envelopes, edges yellowed by time. One by one, he placed them on the casket. She called herself Mama Bear in every one. Reed rubbed his jaw, eyes wet despite his best effort. She was the reason half of us ain't dead or in prison. Every time we got lost, she'd pull us back. Then one night, she just disappeared. No note, no goodbye. We thought she'd moved on. He looked at the pastor. We didn't know she was dying alone. The pastor swallowed hard, trying to find words. But none felt big enough for the silence that followed. Outside, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the wet pavement. The stained glass shimmered, casting soft colors over the pews. For the first time, Evelyn's name didn't sound like a stranger's. She was mother, healer, protector, a woman who saved others while quietly carrying her own scars. And now, through a twist of fate or faith, the family she built, the one she never got to say goodbye to, had come to carry her home. Reed stood, looking at the pastor. Preacher, with your permission. We'd like to ride her to her resting place ourselves. The pastor hesitated, then nodded. She'd like that, he said softly. Tyler wiped his eyes. I'll ride with her. Reed nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then she'll get her last ride with the son she never stopped loving. As they carried the casket toward the door, the engines outside roared to life. The sound was powerful, not angry but reverent. Like thunder paying its respects, people from nearby shops came out to watch. Some filmed, not knowing who the woman was. But those who stayed quiet felt something sacred in that moment. One of the bikers whispered, She's not leaving alone this time. And as the casket was lifted onto the trailer, draped in flowers, sunlight glinting off chrome, the small-town pastor realized he was witnessing something he'd never forget. Sometimes angels don't have wings. Sometimes they ride Harley-Davidsons. The rumble started low, a slow roll of thunder echoing across the quiet street. 12 bikes in formation, headlights slicing through the misty morning air. The casket trailer rolled steady between them, draped in white lilies that fluttered in the wind like soft prayers. Inside the lead truck, Tyler sat beside Reed, holding the single letter he'd found that morning in his jacket pocket, the one he hadn't opened yet. The corner of the envelope had her handwriting. For my boy when I can't tell you myself. He hadn't been ready to read it. Not yet. The convoy rolled past the edge of town where the asphalt cracked and the grass grew tall around the road signs. Every few minutes, another car would pull over to the shoulder, the drivers stepping out with hands pressed to their hearts. They didn't know who she was. They just knew someone important was going home. No one spoke for miles, just the hum of engines and the whisper of wind through helmets. Reed kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight, the memories coming whether he wanted them or not. He remembered the first time he met Evelyn, back when she was barely 22, hair tied up under a bandana, standing in front of a broken-down bike like she'd been born fixing them. The guys had laughed when she joined. Said no woman could ride with the Iron Hawks. She didn't argue. She just climbed on, kicked the starter, and tore down the dirt road so fast the laughter disappeared in her dust. When she came back, she grinned and said, You boys gonna ride or just talk about it? That was Evelyn. Tough when she had to be, gentle when no one else could be. She became their medic, their sister, their conscience. And eventually, She became Reed's heart. But life with the Hawks was rough. There were nights when fights broke out, when deals went bad, when the law came down harder than mercy could hold. Evelyn patched them up every time, until the night she couldn't anymore. He never forgot the last time he saw her. Rain pouring outside the garage, her jacket zipped to the chin. She stood in the doorway, eyes red but voice steady. "Reed," she'd said, "if I stay, I'll lose myself. And if I go, maybe I can find what's left." She didn't tell him she was pregnant. Didn't tell anyone. And now, 20 years later, he was driving beside the boy who carried her eyes. At the back of the line, Rico rode with a flag on his bike. The Iron Hawk's crest faded and patched. He'd been the one to find her. She'd collapsed on the porch of her apartment. Heart failure, they said. Alone, except for the photo of a boy and a letter addressed to the Road family. Inside that letter she'd written, "If I go before the sun rises, don't be sad for me. I've seen the worst of people, and the best. And sometimes they live in the same heart. If you ride for me, don't ride in mourning. Ride for the people we couldn't save, and for the ones who still can be." He'd read that part out loud to the guys. Not a single dry eye in the room. So, when Tyler asked if he could come along, if he could meet her other family, not one man said no. The convoy slowed as they, reached the overlook outside town, a high ridge, where the wind swept clean over the valley. Evelyn used to ride up there every spring, said it was the only place where the world felt big enough for forgiveness. They parked in a semicircle, the casket in the center. The air smelled of rain and wildflowers. Tyler stepped out, clutching the envelope tighter. Reed walked over, removing his gloves. "You okay, son?" Tyler nodded, though his throat burned. "She used to ride here, huh?" "Every chance she got," Reed said softly. "Said the view reminded her that pain's just proof you're still alive." Tyler tried to laugh, but couldn't. Sounds like something she'd say. He hesitated, then looked at Reed. "My dad said she left because she didn't want me." Reed's jaw clenched. "Your dad?" "Didn't know her. She didn't leave out of hate, Tyler. She left because she thought she was poison. She wanted you safe from everything that came with us." Tyler stared out at the horizon, voice barely a whisper. "She thought she was saving me. But all I ever wanted was her." The wind carried his words like a confession. Reed took something from his vest pocket, a small patch frayed around the edges. It was the old Iron Hawk's emblem, the one Evelyn had stitched by hand back in the day. "She made this one," Reed said, pressing it into Tyler's palm. "Said it was for whoever she'd ride with next." Tyler looked down, tears hitting the fabric. "Guess that's me," he said. Reed smiled faintly. "Yeah, kid. Guess it is." When they lifted the casket lid one last time, the sun broke through the clouds, warm and gold. Inside, she looked peaceful, hands folded over her chest, a small feather keychain resting between them. Rico leaned in, whispering, "Ride free, Mama Bear." The others followed in silence, each laying something personal inside, a ring, a patch, a dog tag, a note. Reed placed his leather gloves in last. "She gave us all a reason to keep going," he said quietly. "Now we give her one last ride." Engines roared back to life, shaking the ridge. Tyler climbed onto Reed's bike, clutching his mother's letter. As they rolled out, wind whipping through his hair, he finally tore it open. The first line made him lose his breath. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't say it face to face. But I've watched you every day, not from above, but from the sidelines of a life I couldn't stay in." Tyler's voice cracked as he read aloud, the sound swallowed by the wind. "You didn't need to find me to know me. Everything good in you came from the love I never stopped sending." He pressed the paper to his chest. Behind him, the rumble of bikes stretched down the road, a symphony of loyalty, loss, and love. They weren't just escorting a body. They were carrying a legacy. The road stretched endlessly before them, a ribbon of asphalt slick with sunlight after rain. The convoy rode in silence, wheels humming over the pavement, the world passing in slow, aching beauty. Every mile felt like both a farewell and a prayer. Tyler sat behind Reed, his arms wrapped tight around the man's worn jacket, the letter trembling in his hands. He read it again, the wind catching the corners of the paper, the words blurring with motion and tears. You didn't need to find me to know me. Everything good in you came from the love I never stopped sending. He swallowed hard and kept reading. I know you'll hear stories about me. That I ran. That I gave up. But the truth is, I stayed as long as I could. The world I was part of, it wasn't safe for a child. Not then. Not with what was happening. The next line stopped him cold. There were things I saw, Tyler. Things that could have gotten us both killed. I left so you could live a life not marked by the mistakes I rode with. Tyler blinked, his voice shaking. Reed, what did she mean by that? What things? Reed didn't answer right away. His hands tightened on the handlebars. Finally, he said, she saw too much. Back then, we weren't just a club. We were deep in things we had no business being in. Guns, running protection, favors for people with money and no conscience. He exhaled slowly. She tried to steer us out, tried to turn us into something better. But the more she spoke up, the more enemies she made. There was one night a job went bad. Someone got hurt. She saved our lives that night, and the next morning she was gone. Tyler went quiet, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. The letter fluttered in his grip as he turned to the next page. Her handwriting had changed here, looser, like it had been written through tears. There's something else you need to know. Tyler, something I never told anyone. Reed glanced at him in the rearview mirror. The boy's lips moved as he read. When I left, I wasn't just running from danger. I was running from the truth. You deserve to know who your father is, Reed's breath hitched. He slowed the bike, the others falling back slightly, sensing the shift in energy. His name is Reed Dalton, the man who saved me and broke me in the same breath. I didn't tell him because he would have stayed, and if he stayed, he would have died. So I kept the secret. For him, for you. Tyler's head snapped up. Reed didn't turn around. He just stared at the road ahead, jaw trembling. Yeah, he said hoarsely. I figured I might be. But hearing it, he slowed the bike to a stop at the side of the highway. The others followed, engines idling in a low growl. Tyler slid off, still clutching the letter. Why didn't you ever look for her? Reed removed his helmet, the lines of his face deep and weathered. I did. For years. Every town, every rumor, every whisper. But she didn't want to be found. And when someone like Evelyn makes that choice, you respect it, even if it breaks you. Tyler stared at him, the anger, confusion, and grief all colliding in his chest. You're saying you just let her disappear? I'm saying, Reed said softly, that I loved her enough to let her be free, and now, I'd give anything to tell her I understand. The boy folded the letter carefully, his hands trembling. She kept this secret for 20 years. She thought she was protecting me. She did, Reed said. You're alive. You're standing here. That's what she wanted. Tyler laughed bitterly. Alive doesn't mean okay. Reed looked at him, eyes wet. No, son, but it's a start. The rest of the Hawks watched in silence, each man lost in his own storm. They'd known Reed for decades, seen him fight, fall, and rise again, but never like this. Now, for the first time, the unbreakable man looked human. Rico finally broke the silence. So the kid's one of us then. Reed nodded slowly. Yeah, he's hers. Which makes him family. The men exchanged glances. Not pity, not shock, just a quiet agreement. Tyler's gaze drifted to the trailer carrying the casket. He stepped closer, resting his hand on the smooth wood. You knew her better than anyone, he whispered. You know she wouldn't want this to end in sadness. Reed nodded. She'd want a ride. A proper one. The boy smiled faintly. Then let's finish it. They rolled out again, tighter than before, a single heartbeat of chrome and thunder. The sound filled the empty fields, echoing off barns and hills like a song only the road could understand. Tyler leaned against Reed's back, eyes closed, feeling the rhythm of the bike beneath him. He wasn't sure what came next. How to live with a father he'd never known, or a mother he'd only just lost. But for the first time, He didn't feel alone. As they neared the town's edge, the letter slipped from his fingers and fluttered away into the wind. Reed reached for it, but Tyler shook his head. "Let it go," he said quietly. "She's where she wanted to be." Reed nodded, eyes shining behind his visor. When they passed the Welcome to Ashfield sign, the sun broke free of the clouds again, painting the world in gold. The Hawks rode on. 12 strong, the boy and the father at the center of it all, carrying a story too heavy for words, too sacred for silence. The truth was finally free. The sun dipped low when they finally reached the clearing. It wasn't a cemetery, just a patch of wild grass beside an old oak, the kind that had watched generations live and die without ever asking for a name. That's where Evelyn had asked to rest. No church walls, no polished stone, just open sky and honest ground. Reed killed the engine first, his gloved hands trembling slightly as he shut it off. The others followed, the familiar thunder fading into a silence that felt heavier than any storm. The casket was lowered gently from the trailer, covered in a worn leather jacket instead of flowers. The same jacket Evelyn used to wear when she rode with them. The same one Reed had kept folded in his saddlebag for 20 years. No priest, no speeches. Just wind, and 12 men standing in a half-circle, their shadows stretching long across the grass. Tyler stood closest to the casket, the folded letter still in his pocket. He didn't cry this time, not like at the motel or the hospital, or when he found her last note. The tears had dried, replaced by something deeper, a quiet ache, a hollow that felt like it would never fully close. Reed stepped forward, helmet under his arm, the gold band of his old wedding ring catching a flicker of sunlight. He cleared his throat, but no words came. The wind caught his hair, whispering through the oak leaves like the voice of someone long gone. Rico took off his sunglasses, rubbed his face, and muttered, "She was the heart, man. Every ride, every plan. She kept us from going too far. Reminded us we were human." "Yeah," Big Mike added softly. "She'd smack your hand before she'd let you cross a line. Even when you deserved it." A faint laugh rippled through the group, half sorrow, half fondness. Reed looked down at the casket, voice breaking as he spoke. "She saved us, more times than we deserved. And we let her walk away alone." He paused. "Not again." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a silver locket, old and scratched from years of being carried close. He opened it. One side held a photo of Evelyn, the other of a newborn baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. Tyler gasped quietly. "That's me," Reed nodded. "She left it behind when she disappeared. Said it was for someday. Guess this is someday." He set the locket gently atop the casket, his hand lingering there for a long moment. Then he straightened, looked at the men and said, "We ride for her today. Not just for who she was, for who she made us." Rico raised a hand to his heart. "For Evelyn." The others echoed it, voices rough but steady. "For Evelyn." Tyler knelt beside the casket, running his hand over the leather jacket that covered it. He whispered, "You didn't get to see me grow up, but I'll make sure they do better. I'll make sure we all do better." Reed's voice came low, firm. "She'd like that." Then came the sound that would echo across the valley for years to come. One by one, each hawk started their bike. Engines roared to life in perfect unison, the ground trembling beneath them. The noise wasn't violence, it was reverence. Their tribute. Their goodbye. The wind carried the roar for miles, until it felt like the very earth was humming with her name. Tyler stayed kneeling until the sound faded, then stood. His face was streaked with tears again, but this time there was peace in them. Reed placed a hand on his shoulder. "You ready?" The boy nodded. "Let's take her home." The convoy rode slow, tracing the back roads Evelyn had loved. They passed the old gas station where she used to laugh about the world's worst coffee, the diner where she once patched a biker's hand after a bar fight, the church where she'd stopped a brawl by singing hymns until everyone forgot why they were angry. Every mile was a memory, every turn a story. Tyler leaned forward, speaking into the wind. She wasn't just part of your story, was she? Reed smiled faintly. She was the story. When they reached the bridge outside of town, Reed pulled over. The same bridge where 20 years ago Evelyn had disappeared into the night. Tyler followed his gaze down to the water below. Calm, golden, reflecting the sky. Why here? He asked. Reed exhaled. Because this is where she found her freedom. I think she'd want part of her to stay. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small urn. The name Evelyn Dalton was etched on a simple brass plate. No titles, no dates. Just her name. He handed it to Tyler. You do it. The boy took it carefully, his fingers trembling. He stepped to the edge of the bridge, looking down at the river that had carried so many of her memories. He unscrewed the lid, and for a long moment just stood there, letting the breeze wrap around him. Then softly he said, You can rest now. He tilted the urn, and the ashes caught the light, swirling like smoke, like freedom, before drifting down into the water. The current carried her away, the last glimmer fading beneath the surface. Tyler closed the lid and stepped back. The world suddenly so quiet it hurt. Reed rested a hand on his back. She's not gone, you know. Tyler looked up. No, Reed smiled. Every time we ride, she's right there, between the wind and the road. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in amber and violet. One by one, the hawks revved their engines, the sound low and steady, like a heartbeat refusing to fade. Tyler climbed onto Reed's bike again, and as they rolled away from the bridge, he glanced back one last time. The river shimmered, endless and alive, and for a moment, just one, he could have sworn he saw her there, smiling, riding alongside them, free. The sun had nearly set when the convoy turned back toward town. It wasn't a fast ride, no roaring down highways or wheelies for the crowd. It was something quieter, almost sacred. Each biker rode with a straight back and lowered head, the rumble beneath them sounding more like a hymn than an engine. Tyler sat behind Reed, his hands gripping the worn leather of his jacket. His cheek rested lightly against the man's back, the faint smell of oil and wind and dust filling his lungs. It was oddly comforting, like he was finally breathing again after years of holding it in. No one spoke over the radio. No one needed to. The message was already written in the silence between them. By the time they reached the edge of town, the sky was bruised purple, the first stars beginning to flicker through the haze. The neon sign of the Dusty Horn Diner blinked weakly in the distance, a place that had once been Evelyn's favorite stop after a long ride. Reed slowed the bike and pulled in. The rest followed, parking in a perfect line, chrome catching the glow of the diner lights. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and fried onions, but it was warm, familiar. Doris, the owner, a white-haired woman with eyes that saw everything, looked up from behind the counter. The moment she saw Reed and the others walk in, her face softened. You boys finally came back, she said, her voice trembling. Reed nodded. Had to, for her. Doris wiped her hands on her apron. She used to sit right there, you know. She pointed to a corner booth by the window. Never left without leaving a note for someone who needed it. Tyler looked at the booth. Cracked red leather, sunlight spilling across the tabletop. A folded napkin sat there now, untouched. He walked over and picked it up. There was handwriting on it, faint but unmistakable. Evelyn's, ride kind, leave no soul behind. He traced the words with his finger, his throat tightening. She wrote this? Doris nodded. Years ago, after she helped a kid who ran away, said she wanted that message to stay right there. Reed chuckled quietly, shaking his head. That sounds like her. Tyler looked up, his voice low. She never stopped helping people, did she? Reed smiled sadly. Not once. They sat in the booth together, Tyler, Reed, Rico, Big Mike, and the rest of the Hawks, and ordered coffee. No one said much, but every clink of a mug, every deep breath, felt like part of a prayer. After a while, Tyler spoke again. She used to ride with you guys. Did she ever talk about me? Reed hesitated. The others looked at him, silently urging him to tell the truth. She did. he said softly. But she didn't say much, just that you had your father's eyes and her heart. She wanted to keep you safe, even if it meant staying away. Tyler stared into his coffee, eyes glistening. She didn't have to do it alone. Reed reached across the table and placed a rough, calloused hand over his. We all think we can carry our ghosts alone, kid. Until one day they start carrying us. Tyler nodded slowly. I think I understand that now. Outside, the wind picked up. Soft at first, then steady, whistling through the parking lot like a memory calling their names. Rico looked out the window and smirked. You know what she'd say right now? Reed raised a brow. What? She'd tell us to stop sulking and get back on the road. Said the wind doesn't wait for anyone. That got a few quiet laughs around the booth. Sounds like her, Big Mike said. Can't sit still even in heaven. Tyler grinned faintly. Then let's ride. They stepped outside again, and Reed noticed the way Tyler's shoulders had changed. Still heavy with grief, but steadier. Like the road itself had lent him some of its strength. The kid stood beside Evelyn's old bike, the one they'd restored years ago but never ridden since she left. Its chrome was faded, the seat cracked, but the emblem, a small hawk carved into the gas tank, still shone under the moonlight. Was this hers? Tyler asked. Reed nodded. Every mile she rode was on that machine. It's been waiting a long time. Tyler ran a hand along the handlebars, eyes full of awe and sadness. Think she'd mind if I took it for a spin? Reed smiled. I think she'd want you to. The Hawks exchanged looks, all quiet approval. Reed handed him a helmet, its paint chipped but still proud. Tyler slipped it on, swung his leg over the seat, and the engine coughed to life. A deep, throaty growl that made every man there stand a little taller. He revved it once, then twice. The sound rolled across the empty road like thunder returning home. Reed got on his own bike and nodded. Let's give her one last ride. The convoy formed again, headlights cutting through the night, tires kissing the asphalt. The wind howled. The stars blurred. For the first time since she passed, it didn't feel like they were running from loss. It felt like they were riding with her. Tyler leaned into the turn, eyes stinging from the cold, but his heart was alive, beating in rhythm with the engines around him. Each mile felt like forgiveness. Each gust of wind like her hand on his shoulder saying, You made it, baby. You're home. When they reached the overlook above the town, they stopped. Below them, the city lights glimmered like candles. Reed killed the engine and looked out. You feel that? Tyler nodded. Yeah. That's peace, Reed said softly. For a long moment, they stood there. No words, no noise. Just wind and breath and the distant hum of life carrying on. Then Tyler reached into his jacket and pulled something from his pocket. The napkin from the diner, the one that read, Ride kind, leave no soul behind. He folded it carefully and tucked it into the pocket of Evelyn's leather jacket, which now rested across his shoulders. She'll keep riding with us, he said quietly. Reed smiled, eyes glinting under the moonlight. Yeah, she always does. The wind rose again, carrying the faint scent of rain and wildflowers, and for just a second, they all swore they heard it. The soft purr of another engine. Far off, running beside them in perfect harmony, Evelyn. 5 years later. The rusted halo no longer looked like a forgotten garage on the edge of town. The faded sign still hung above the door, but now it gleamed beneath a fresh coat of red and gold, the same colors Evelyn once painted on her bike. The scent of gasoline still lingered, but it was now joined by something softer. Coffee brewing inside, the faint sound of laughter echoing from the back room. Tyler stood by the door, older now, a streak of silver catching in his hair. He wore his mother's old leather jacket, the one patched with wings. Beneath the embroidered hawk, new words had been stitched. The rusted halo foundation, for every soul left behind. He looked out at the long stretch of road where the horizon shimmered in the morning light. The sound of approaching engines rose in the distance, deep, familiar, powerful. The Iron Hawks were coming home. It had started small. Just a handful of bikers showing up once a month to talk, to share stories, to fix a bike or two for kids who couldn't afford repairs. But then the news spread. A group of men in leather, once feared for their looks, were now known for what they did. Rescuing runaways, repairing cars for single mothers, helping veterans get back on their feet. They didn't advertise it. They didn't need to. The world noticed. Reporters came once, years ago, asking how it all began. Tyler just smiled and said, "It started with a woman who never gave up on broken people." He never said her name on camera, but every man in that garage knew Evelyn Harper, the woman who built them, saved them, and gave them something to believe in. The first of the bikes pulled in, Rico, still wearing his old vest, though his hair had gone gray around the edges. Behind him came Big Mike, followed by Reed, now leaning heavier on his cane but grinning like he'd never aged. "Look at this place," Reed said as he climbed off his bike, shaking his head. "She'd have loved this." "She's the reason it exists," Tyler said quietly. Inside, the garage had changed too. The back wall was lined with framed photos, smiling kids holding helmets, rebuilt bikes with names etched into their tanks, volunteers in rusted halo shirts handing out food at shelters. At the center of it all hung a single photo, Evelyn. Mid-laugh, wind whipping through her hair, sunglasses pushed to her forehead. Below it was her bike, polished, untouched, her seat empty, but always ready. Tyler ran a hand along its handlebar. "She'd probably call us all fools for getting sentimental," he said, smiling. Rico snorted. "Yeah, then she'd hug us and tell us to stop crying." They all laughed, the sound echoing through the room like old times. But this day was different. Today marked 5 years since Evelyn's passing. And every year since, the Hawks rode in her memory, a ride they called the Legacy Run. They didn't take donations. They didn't seek cameras. They just rode, from the rusted halo to the coast, following the same route Evelyn had taken on her final trip. But this time, the line of riders stretched for miles. Not just bikers, nurses, veterans, teachers, even the kids who once came through their doors. All riding, walking, or waving from the roadside, a tradition born not of grief but gratitude. Reed stepped forward and placed his helmet on Evelyn's bike seat. He looked at Tyler. "You leading us this year?" Tyler hesitated. "I've never led before. That was always—" He stopped himself, looking at the photo. Then he smiled softly. "Yeah, I'll lead." Outside, the crowd gathered. Engines idled low, exhaust puffing in rhythm, the sound deep and unified. The road shimmered ahead like a silver ribbon leading straight into the sun. Tyler mounted his mother's bike. The engine roared to life on the first try, clean, smooth, alive. It felt like her hand was on his shoulder. Reed gave a slow nod. "Take her home, son," Tyler throttled forward. The other riders falling in behind him. The procession stretched down the highway, hundreds of bikes thundering together, chrome glinting, flags fluttering in the wind. Cars pulled over, people stood on porches waving, kids held up signs that read, "Ride safe, Hawks." But the loudest noise came from within. The heartbeat of every rider who'd ever known loss. Pain or love strong enough to change them. Halfway down the route, they stopped by the overlook. The same cliff Evelyn once watched the sunrise from. Years ago, Tyler dismounted, holding her letter in his hand. The paper had worn soft over time, but the words were still clear. He read the last line aloud, voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "Tell him I'm still out there, in every sunset that hits the asphalt just right, in every gust of wind before the rain." That's me. Riding ahead, clearing the road. He looked up at the horizon, the sun glowing red and gold, just like the paint on her bike. Rico stepped beside him. "Think she'd be proud?" Tyler smiled faintly. "No doubt in my mind." They stood in silence for a long while, the wind tugging gently at their jackets. Then, one by one, the Hawks raised their helmets high, a quiet salute to the woman who gave them a reason to ride. When they started their engines again, the sound wasn't just noise. It was a promise, a vow to keep her legacy alive, not through speeches or plaques, but through action, to stop for the stranded, to listen when no one else does, to protect the lost. Because that's what Evelyn did. That's what the Hawks would always do. As the bikes rolled away, a nurse stood by the roadside, wiping tears from her cheeks. She didn't know their story, but she felt it. That weight of love and loss that could only come from people who'd truly lived both. When the last of the riders disappeared into the light, something small drifted down from the sky, a single white feather landing on the road, gleaming in the sun. Tyler caught sight of it in his mirror and smiled. "Still clearing the road," he whispered, "and if you stood there long enough, with the wind in your ears and the sun on your face, you might swear you heard her laughter in the distance. Soft, defiant, free. If this story reminded you that real family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when no one else does, then hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Have you ever met a stranger who changed your life? Tell us in the comments. Your story might inspire our next ride of courage and compassion. And here's a challenge for our sharp-eyed viewers. At minute 7:14, there's a small moment when Tyler glances at the photo wall, and his mother's reflection appears just for a second in the chrome. Did you catch it? Because in every story of the Hawks, some roads never really end.